The Linux Action Show is created by Jupiter Broadcasting. It's sponsored by Ting. Go to last.ting.com to save off your first device or plan, and DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital, and then you can spin up your own Linux rig for free. Welcome to Linux Action Show, episode 383. My name is Chris.
My name is Noah.
Hey, Noah, guess what? Big show today coming up on this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. We're going to take a look at a legitimate Plex alternative, a fully open source media center solution that has many of the features that Plex offers, but it's not tied to a third-party service. You can go off the grid and run it yourself. This is something I know our audience has been looking for a long time, and we have an in-depth review in this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, so stay tuned for that. And then later in the news segment, it is definitely the year of Linux. Microsoft announces their own distribution of Linux. China's sales of Linux are off the charts. And Ubuntu has a new hardware store. We're going to tell you all about that in the news segment, plus an update on that open Wi-Fi router firmware issue where the FCC is trying to lock down third-party firmwares. We'll give you a brief update on that. And VirtualBox's new policy about not telling you about vulnerabilities. What the hell is that? And is VirtualBox basically DOA now? I'm pretty concerned about it, so I want to share that with you guys. And then also we're going to talk about AMD's plans to support Vulkan under Linux. Then in the feedback segment, we've got some great emails and an announcement from our friends over at the BSD Now program. We're going to do some road show trip updates. But before all of that, Noah, you know what we got?
It's the picks.
It's the picks. And I am in love with the picks this week. So let's start with our Runs Linux. Now, there was a real solid submission that came in this week to Runs Linux, but we're going to actually cover that one in the news segment because this is Linux in a brand new territory. The light bulb, Disney's light bulb, runs Linux and supports TCP connections. Disney Research have taken LED-based light strips and made it a bit further by putting them into a light bulb and adding Linux and TCP network stacks, and then they're planning to sell them in consumer lamps. This is pretty nuts, and they use the Linux kernel module to integrate the VLC protocol, which is not VLC LAN player, it's a different thing, and physical MAC addresses into the Linux networking stack. And they say this system supports ICMP, UDP, and TCP. It has an 8-bit Amtel controller, and they use OpenWRT for the Linux environment. How about that, Noah? On a light bulb.
Awesome. That is awesome.
This feels like this should be the lamp next to your Linux-powered fridge at home.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah, but there are two things that stand out to me. One is it's really cool that the light bulb is using OpenWRT, but the other thing that's really cool is, isn't it neat how when the original core team got together to develop OpenWRT, I bet you in a million years the last thing anyone ever said is, "Hey, I wonder if one day somebody would want to put this on a light bulb."
Yeah,
that just never occurred to them. And because they just said, "Well, we're going to make this project, and we're going to contribute code and get all the base layer of a really good router operating system laid down," then 6, 7, 8 years later, somebody can come by and say, "Well, we need an operating system for this light bulb. Hey, we could use this OpenWRT."
The other thing that strikes me about it is it makes the toaster quaint. Linux could run on a toaster. NetBSD runs on a toaster. Yeah, that's adorable. Yeah, now we got a light bulb. That's the new benchmark now. It's not a fridge. It's not a toaster. It's a light bulb.
This was the example. Things like this, these smart light bulbs, was the example that one of my instructors used back when I was doing my network certification, is to explain why 25,000 addresses for every man, woman, and child on planet Earth wouldn't be enough with IPv6. Because he was saying that if every light switch, if every light bulb has an IP address, if every door handle has an IP address, and I still, to this day, I still don't believe that. I still think that IPv6 is so many times over what we would actually need, even if you give I don't have 25,000 objects in my house. I don't believe that. I mean, unless we start doing forks and knives.
No, but you definitely see how IPv4 is running out of time. All right, so Noah, speaking of running out of time, I'm running out of time. So I'm so used to doing the Linux Action Show on Sundays, because that's where it's been forever, that in last week's episode, I said I would be on the road in this episode, but I was forgetting that we've moved it to Friday for the summer and during the road trip and maybe beyond, I don't know. And so this is the last show I'm recording before I hit the road, and then I'm going to tear down some aspects of the studio. I'm going to take my mic, and I'm going to set up the machines in here to receive additional remote input. But one of the key things that was still missing in the whole setup until about 20 minutes before the show started was actually the remote broadcast package itself, the remote studio itself. And a little box showed up. And this is literally a studio in a box. And I took it out of the box. It's from Noah. And it's a pretty slick rig. And Noah, do you want to explain what you assembled here and how we're going to do audio from the road?
Yeah, sure. So if there's one thing I know about Chris, it's that he will sacrifice almost anything else for the quality, for the audio quality, right? Whatever else happens, we have to maintain a good, solid audio quality. So I looked for the best possible compressor I could get that I would be able to run on DC. And as it turns out, it doesn't run on DC. It runs on AC.
Hey, that's me.
But it's a low enough draw that I was able to use a very small inverter that doesn't require any sort of cooling fans. Because of course cooling fans would sacrifice the audio quality, right?
Yep.
And I think that compressor sounds amazing.
By the way, don't sell yourself short. Like, sounds like you went through several different rigs to try to find, or several different inverters to try to find one that was quiet enough for production, Noah, and I really do appreciate that.
So I went to Lowe's and I bought the first inverter, construction grade inverter that they had there, and I bring it home and I plug it in and everything powered up, and I'm like, all right. So I put the headphones on and I plugged in a 320, which you were going to use, and I go to speak in it and I hear in the back, I'm like, what the heck is that? So I take my headphones off and I look and I'm like, oh, that's never going to work. That's never going to work. Like, he's going to kill me if I send him that. So I'm like, all right, so back. So then we went through, and yeah, it took a couple of them, but we finally found one that doesn't spin up the fans unless if you put enough draw on, it does kick up the fan, but it certainly doesn't the way it's set up.
I probably won't put that much draw on it. Yeah, so all of this fits in. I started going through my photo album today because I also, by the way, had barbecue for breakfast, or I had a hot dog for breakfast, which I was just showing on the live stream. So the whole thing, Noah, which you're kind of underselling, fits in this Pelican type crate, which is really slick and makes it much more actually manageable in the Rover. So I really, really appreciate that aspect of it. That is slick. What is that?
You think that'll be small enough you can fit it under one of those storage compartments?
I think so. Even if I can't fit it under the storage compartment, I could fit it under the table.
Oh yeah.
So that's good enough. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. I got to hook all this up and try it, of course, tonight and tomorrow. There's a few things left to do yet, but
I'll tell you what I would tell a client if they asked me to, because really what happened was I was like, hey, this would be a fun project, I should do it, and then I came up woefully short of time, so I didn't really get a chance to work out the kinks. So we'll call that an opening set of ideas for a remote broadcasting package.
I like it, Noah. I like it a lot, and if you guys are curious about the epic journey that I'm about to take, go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover for a live tracker and also a link to the playlist of the videos. I just posted another update. I had black tank woes, and I solved them. Ha ha! And I posted an update about that. All right, I am really excited about these picks. I am very, very excited about the desktop app pick and the weekly spotlight. It's a theme, and we're going to get into it in just a second. But first, I want to talk about DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com and remember our promo code LASDigital, LAS Digital, all one word, lowercase. That's going to give you a $10 credit. Now, DigitalOcean is an entire infrastructure built on top of Linux using SSDs and KVM for the virtualization. And now they have such incredible built-in support for Docker that I really want to encourage, if you're doing some development locally in Docker and want to publish up to an online instance, I encourage you to check out DigitalOcean. But let me tell you a little bit about them, because even if you're not messing with Docker or anything like that, they are still an incredible advantage for anybody that wants to have a little bit of control over their own data, but have it up somewhere very fast, dependable, and with a lot of different geographical locations. So for me, I've been experimenting for a while with building more and more services on DigitalOcean that I like a lot. I covered this quite a bit in this week's episode or last week's, I guess, episode of Linux Unplugged, episode 110. I've talked about a lot of technologies I'm using to go offline, and a lot of them are perfect for installing on a DigitalOcean droplet. Not only do they have one-click deployments of a lot of open source applications, but then they have tons of guides to use, like, just for any kind of scenario that you might want to set up, like Nginx or Apache or a service. They have just so many great guides that you can use to take it even a little bit further if they don't have a one-click application install. And they have a great set of distributions to choose from: Fedora, Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, etc. They can also, remember, with our promo code LASDigital, try it out for 2 months for free. And here's the best part. You can get started in less than 55 seconds. So if you're kind of like, I'm not sure if you're on the fence, try it out. LASDigital supports the show, gives you a $10 credit. You can get started in less than a minute. You'll get it for $5 a month. You're going to get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. That's enough transfer that I don't think you're going to burn through that. And you might want to consider maybe looking into one of those web-based or even command line-based like RTorrent, something, a remote BitTorrent client. Just set a limit and maybe seed your favorite distro. Like Antigros is one that I'll seed from time to time, just to help them out a little bit. When I do a download, now this has only been for the last couple of weeks because I didn't tell you this, Noah, but I did a complete reload of a laptop in the Rover. And
awesome.
Yeah. And so I downloaded the ISO on a DigitalOcean droplet and I just set it to seed to a 3:0 ratio because I've got a terabyte of transfer.
Right.
And it's like a great project. And, why not?
And I bet you still weren't able to eat it up.
No, never. Never even gotten close. Never even gotten close. But I really love the DigitalOcean interface too. That's another great aspect of it. And their API lets you replicate that interface on a straightforward, just real easy basis. And there's a ton of great apps that already take advantage of them. A lot of them are open source. You can use the promo code LASTDigital, get that $10 credit, and support this show. Go check them out. DigitalOcean.com, and a big thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. All right, so let's talk about Privoxy. Privoxy, a non-caching, that's an important part. So it's not like Squid, a non-caching web proxy with advanced filtering capabilities for enhanced privacy, modifying web page data and HTTP headers, controlling access, removing ads, and other obnoxious internet junk. Privoxy has a flexible configuration and can be customized to suit individual needs and tastes. What do you think, Noah?
Yeah, so I actually I had a really hard time actually getting this set up and working. In fact, I don't know that I can say that it was 100% successful. So it's actually it takes a little bit of work to get it set up, but I like anything that I can do to increase privacy where I don't notice that I'm increasing privacy. So for example, one of the things that I've always noticed with Tor is I take a significant hit in my speed anytime I'm running through a Tor proxy. Yeah. And so that has kind of been problematic. But one of the neat situations that I'm in is I have access to a lot of different systems, right? And a lot of different networks and a lot of different places that I can send traffic out of. And sometimes it can be beneficial to send my traffic out if I pick one of those and do it. Or of course, I'm sure you could do it like on a DigitalOcean droplet. But this is just one of those tools that I was kind of playing with, and it's definitely a project that deserves a little bit of extra attention, and definitely people should check it out and take a look at it. I'd have a hard time saying like this is something that I'm going to start using. Because my experience just wasn't that smooth. You know what I do like, Noah, from like a network administration standpoint, is I like the ability to offer network-wide ad filtering. I said it on today. I went into a lot more detail on today's Tech Talk Today episode. I think it was like 213 or something. But it is full-on war for online display advertising, and I think that this is. So I am thinking of everything in terms of what can I do to make my internet usage more efficient and faster when I'm in the Rover, because truth be told, it is a disaster right now where I'm currently at. I have barely any cell signal. It's okay, but it's just anything I can do to cut out extra crap from the web is going to save me bandwidth and time to load websites. And if I can ultimately money. Yeah. And if I can use Privoxy to cut out some of the web crap, I would like caching though, but maybe I could use Squid. I'm not sure. But that's that actually catches my attention. I like that a lot. So that's Privoxy, and it's privoxy.org, and we have a link in the show notes. You guys can go check that out. All right, now I want to talk about S-Shuttle, or SSH Huddle, however you want to say it. It's a transparent proxy server. It's essentially a poor man's VPN. It forwards over SSH, doesn't require much admin work, and works with Linux, Mac OS, and it supports DNS tunneling. Now, this came onto my radar because I'm going to be on the road, and I want to be able to connect back into some of these machines here to do things. And sometimes to do things properly, you need to be on kind of essentially the LAN. So what SSH Huddle does, or however you want to say it, is makes this dead easy. Simple. Now, you guys are probably pretty familiar with like other ways to accomplish something similar with SSH, but this is kind of fascinating because what it does is it sets up a transparent proxy that is sort of a proxy that meets a VPN that meets SSH. And the author says, as far as he knows, it's the only program that solves the following common case. Your client machine is Linux, FreeBSD, or Mac OS, not Windows. You have access to a remote network via SSH. You don't necessarily have admin access on the remote network. The remote network has no VPN
or only a stupid complex VPN protocol like PPTP or IPsec. Or maybe you are the admin and you just get frustrated with awful state of VPN tools. Hello. You don't want to create an SSH port forward for every single host on the remote network. Exactly. You hate OpenSSH's port forwarding because it's randomly slow and or stupid. And you can't use OpenSSH's permit tunnel feature because it's disabled by default on OpenSSH servers. Plus, it does TCP over TCP, which has terrible performance. So this solves all of those. You just need to have sudo su or logged in as root on the client machine. If you use Linux on your client machine, IP tables installed on the client, including at least the IP tables DNAT and redirect and TTL modules, because it's going to set up some rules on your machine. And they got some crap in here if you have a Mac that you need to know about too, but basically you're fine, except for there's a bug in one version of macOS you have to read about. And then you just, like on Ubuntu, it's super easy to install. I have it linked in the show notes. And it sets up with IP tables and DNS, all of your traffic can go through through an SSH connection. And so I will essentially, during these times on the road when I need to connect into the studio and do something locally, will be on the LAN through an SSH connection with absolutely minimum firewall configuration here at the server, at the studio. And I haven't tried it yet from remote connection because I have such limited connectivity remotely. And I have a couple other options under my sleeve that I'll talk about in a future episode. But this is the one I'm sharing this week. It's open source and it looks awesome. And it's not exactly a VPN and it's not exactly port forwarding. And it's kind of both. It's kind of neither. And that's why I like it. It's like a VPN since you can forward every port on an entire network or just the ports you specify. But on the other hand, it works like most SSH port forwarding. It works more like SSH port forwarding than a VPN. Because normally a VPN forwards your data one packet at a time and doesn't care about the individual connections, i.e. it's stateless with respect to traffic, where SSH huddle is, or SSH huddle or whatever, is the opposite of stateless. It tracks every single connection. So you could compare it to something like, if you're familiar with Slurp, which was a user space TCP/IP implementation that did something similar. But it's using SSH here. And it's really cool if you're familiar with this stuff. And we have it linked in the show notes. And yeah, you guessed it, of course. It's open source. It does require Python 2. So I'm guessing you have that, but you do have to have it installed both locally and on the remote system. And it is under the GPL2, so it is totally free for you to modify.
You know, I got to tell you, that seems like that has a lot more uses outside of just an RV.
Oh, yeah, I know, right?
especially when you work in IT for a living. I'm thinking of all sorts of places I could use something like that.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I know, it's funny how I'll frame it that way, but yeah, there's a ton of different use cases for it, of course, and so that's why I was really excited to pick that one. And it fits really well with the theme of the show because that's what I'll be using while I'm on the road, and it also kind of works well with the previous pick. You can find all of our past picks over at jupiterbroadcasting.com/lastpicks. Remember to follow the Rover, jupiterbroadcasting.com/Rover. If you want to meet up with me on the road, meetup.com/jupiterbroadcasting. Check out also Odyssey Westra in the Google Plus community. He'll be talking with folks over there. He's sometimes in the chat room during live shows, and he's coordinating meetups. All right, Noah, let's do the news.
Hey, it's the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Go to last.ting.com to get a $50 discount off your first Ting device or $50 in Ting service credit. What is Ting? Ting is mobile that makes sense. Ting is powering my internet connectivity in the Rover, and Ting could be your mobile service provider too. No contract, no early termination fee. It's a flat $6 for the line, and you only pay for what you use. They take your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes, and they add them all up, and whatever bucket you fall into, that's all you got to pay. Ting is on a mission to make mobile make sense. That's why they have an early termination relief program. That's why they have an incredible dashboard. That's why they have super motivated support staff. And that's why they have a crazy active support community online. Go over to last.ting.com to give us credit for your visit, but also to check out Ting's CDMA and GSM coverage. See if a device you have is compatible, because if it is, you're going to get a $50 service credit by visiting last.ting.com. Now, my bill right now is $38 for 3 smartphones. $38. You just have to be a little savvy with your Wi-Fi, and you can save crazy amounts of money. They have a savings calculator that you can try out. They have some great devices, including, I got to say, right now, I am extremely, extremely impressed with their sales. So this is a great chance to get some great devices at a great price. $5 for a Ting GSM or CDMA SIM card. If you've got something you could slide that into, $5, and then it's a no-contract cellular service for that. Free shipping site-wide. That's nice. Kyocera Kona right now, $68, no contract, no early termination fee, a solid feature phone that lasts for days. They also have the Samsung S6 and the Blue Studio 6.0 on sale. some really good stuff, plus our $50 discount. This is a great month to get something from Ting. Go to last.ting.com. I have recently been rocking the Netgear Zing from the Rover. And I've got to say, the thing I like the most about the Zing is you can do the entire setup on the device. It's got a touch screen, so everything is set up right there. When it launches for the first time, it has a setup wizard. You set on the device what the Wi-Fi network is, what the password's going to be, all these things. You can check your connected devices, all the additional settings. You can check alerts to see if there's been any cellular issues. You get your current battery status, the current cellular strength signal, and the total data usage during that billing period right there on the screen. The Netgear Zing, when you go to last.ting.com, $114. Then you got a data connection in your pocket with no contract, only $6 a month. You pay for what you use. I'm using this to get me across the U.S. over to Noah's house. You can get it too. Last.ting.com.
Now, are you on GSM or CDMA?
This particular one is on CDMA. I'm going to pick up a GSM one myself. This does have a GSM SIM in it, or like a SIM slot. So I'm not exactly sure if I could use that or not, but my intention, because I think it's just CDMA, my intention is to have one CDMA MiFi. Oh, look at that. Oh, yeah, no, this Zing does support GSM and CDMA at the same time. That's really cool.
So here's why that kind of makes sense. And I'm sure now that I'm going to go on the record and say this in the recording as it's going to go out for the episode, 1,000 people are going to write in and tell me how I don't understand cellular technology, which I admit is probably true. But my understanding is that the part that supports the 4G LTE part of GSM is how CDMA carriers are also getting their 4G coverage. So, for example, when Verizon offers 4G LTE coverage, that portion is a GSM technology.
I don't know if that's true or not, but but from my understanding, what it really comes down to is different networks have different frequency ranges, and some frequency ranges work better in different areas in the United States. Like, for example, the 700 megahertz range works particularly well here in the United States. And so I don't know what bands this thing supports, but what I'm on the search for is a GSM device that supports as many bands as possible. It's essentially compatible with the T-Mobile network, so that way I can work it with the Ting network. And Ting has been extremely, extremely nice and offered to sponsor the data of the Rover, so that way I can stay connected and do broadcasts back to the studio. And so now I just have to find a great GSM device. They've given me the Zing to work with, and they overnighted it to make sure I got it in time for the road trip. I mean, Ting just goes above and beyond with their customer service. Go to last.ting.com to find out more and try out their savings calculator. And by the way, another nice thing for those of us who just like to manage stuff on our own, like late at night when we're up or whatever, they have a really good dashboard that just basically does everything you need. Last.ting.com. Hey, Noah, did you know that Linux is one?
That's what the rumors on the internet say.
Yeah, it's apparently won all of the things. I mean, I don't know how to define winning any more than this, because Microsoft is now developing its own Linux distribution. I repeat, Microsoft has its own Linux distro. It's developed its own Linux distribution, and it actually wants you to know about it. It's running on Azure to do networking. Redmond's revealed that it's built something called Azure Cloud Switch. Now, I believe henceforth it's going to be called, you're going to hear it called ACS. That's pretty much all Microsoft ever calls it. And Microsoft describes it as a cross-platform, modular operating system for data center networking built on Linux. And our foray, they say, into building our own software for running network devices like switches. Now, why not Windows? My first reaction, Noah, why do you think they didn't use Windows? What's your first reaction?
I think that I think that despite what Microsoft's marketing team will say, Microsoft knows that if you want to succeed in the data center, if you want ultimate reliability, if you want ultimate scalability, you're not building that back-end infrastructure on Windows Server. I think that they know that, and I think that it has gotten to a point where they're no longer trying to market Windows as a product. They're trying to market Azure as a service, and they want that service, if it is to sell, to be extremely reliable, extremely robust, extremely scalable, and to do those things, they're going to build it on Linux. What I don't like about this is that in a typical Microsoft fashion, instead of going to Canonical and saying, hi guys, we have this product called Azure and we want to run it on Ubuntu as we tell other people that they can do if they have their own Azure instance, we want to... we're going to build from the ground up our own Linux distribution, despite having no real experience in the...
Let me stop you there and see if this changes your mind. So obviously, I think Ubuntu is available on Azure, and I think they are working with Canonical to enable that. Here's the difference, Noah, is this isn't like Azure virtual server instances. This is as your virtual networking and networking software instances. So this is essentially software-defined networking. And the rumor, according to the Register, is that Microsoft couldn't find anybody in the hardware level, like, you know, all of the hardware vendors that build the chips that actually power these switches and things. Nobody wants to work with Windows there. Everybody's building to Linux there because Linux is so far ahead in that area that when even Microsoft came to play in that territory, they're like, yeah, we don't support that. You got to run Linux. That's what the Register seems to say, is that, and Microsoft is able to spin that and says that the ACS focuses on feature development based on Microsoft priorities and allows us to debug, fix, and test software bugs much faster. It also allows us the flexibility to scale down the software and develop features that are required for our data center and our networking needs. And I think that part might be kind of key, is they're building this for Azure. And I think that's why maybe like Ubuntu Snappy didn't necessarily work for their needs or something like that, because this is potentially Azure specific.
I guess I can kind of see that, but to me, it just seems anytime somebody says we have to have our own Linux distribution because what exists won't work for our needs, I don't know. Usually I find that to be an excuse.
Yeah.
Usually I find that if you actually look at it from a holistic perspective, they end up reinventing the wheel or repatching things or coming up with solutions that already existed in other distributions. And especially if you take something like Debian or, you know, a really scaled down simplistic base version of Linux and say, well, we'll do this on Debian and just tweak a little bit here and there. But based on the article, it seems to me, or at least I read it to be, that they have essentially said, we're going to use the Linux kernel and we're just going to build everything up the way that we want it.
That is what it sounds like. They even have a diagram that kind of drives that point home. And what I wondered there is how long are they going to spin their wheels doing that before they just decide, well, let's buy a Linux distribution with a name and then we'll use their brand. And I have a few guesses on which distro they would buy, but
so what happened? What do we do as users if that happens? So like let's play the hypothetical game for a second. Let's say that tomorrow Microsoft comes out and buys let's say Ubuntu
or SUSE.
OpenSUSE. Okay, let's say they buy OpenSUSE.
I don't think it's going to be canonical because they'd be buying. So in the case of Ubuntu, they'd probably be buying out canonical, right? In the case of SUSE, they could just be buying that asset because SUSE has been passed around like a hooker for years now between different major over companies. Mm-hmm. And so nothing says that you couldn't just come. It's probably all divided out into a nice asset. Here is our SUSE division filled with our best engineers, our smartest people in the company, building our best products, and they can sell it for a nice high dollar value to Microsoft, who has a whole history of working with Novell and working with SUSE and working with SUSE in virtualization. It would just be the perfect match. The problem is the market wants Ubuntu or Debian.
So let's just say that happens. How as a user do we respond? Because take for example, let's say it really takes off. Let's say that just becomes the thing that Microsoft SUSE takes off and it's a wild success, at least by Microsoft standards. And now there's a Linux distribution that's backed by an enormous company that has a lot of play in the software world, where basically when Microsoft announces the new version of Microsoft Office, for example, every business says, well, I guess that's the new version of Office Suite we're using because that's just the industry standard. So what happens when a company like that steps in and says, here's the Linux distribution that we now own, back support, and are distributing? How does that make us feel as users? Do we support that and say, well, now we can have our cake and eat it too, because we're not fighting upstream to use Linux because it's backed by the same company that makes the only real competitive other operating system? Or do we look and say, Microsoft has screwed us so many times in the past over so many things, if they bought that Linux distribution, that'll be the one Linux distribution I'm not using?
I think it'd be a good mix of all of that. I think it'd be all of the above. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it really would be a massive response like that. I kind of hope it happens, not because I want that to happen, just because I'd be really interested to watch the response.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I got to tell you about the response that I am not so happy to. VirtualBox is a response to disclosing VirtualBox's security vulnerabilities. I am not impressed here. I don't know what to make of this. This is a direct quote from the seclist.org mail here from the Debian patch notification. It says, this update for VirtualBox fixes an unspecified security issue in the VirtualBox related to guests using bridge networking via Wi-Fi. Oracle no longer provides information on specific security vulnerabilities in VirtualBox. That's in the bug release, patch release. To still support users of the already released Debian releases, we've decided to update these to respective 4.140 and 4.3030 bug fixes. So it is now VirtualBox's policy not to disclose vulnerabilities in VirtualBox. This, to me, is the sign that Oracle is completely losing touch with the needs of this product.
I guess I would argue how much you care about this depends on what you think or how you view VirtualBox as a product. So for example, for me, VirtualBox is a substitution tool. I don't sit down and say, I'm going to get some work done. Let me fire up my VMs. I'm aware that some people do that. But to me, it's I fire it up. I do the 5 or 10 minutes of things that I need to do in my VirtualBox, and then I close it back down. That's the end of it. All my primary work is being done on my actual computer. So for me, I guess I don't really care if there are a couple of vulnerabilities. It's not going to be powered up long enough, and there's nothing sensitive on there that I really care about. On the other hand, on the other hand, though, I am fully aware that there are people that they live inside of virtual environments. They are testing server client architecture. They are doing development, and so I have a friend. He's a developer, and he literally has 4 or 5 different VirtualBoxes spun up, and he's doing all sorts of crazy things. And for him, practically anytime his laptop is on, he's got 2 or 3 VirtualBoxes going. If that was my workflow, I'd really care about the fact that they're not disclosing this stuff.
What rubs me the wrong way about it, and it does bother me from an information standpoint for the end users, that, and also if I had VirtualBox deployed in any kind of serious business or enterprise situation, I'd be very annoyed by this. But where I feel that it's egregious, where I feel that it is a violation of community protocol, is the security community is very reliant on the sharing of this information once it's been fixed. What the security community at large has agreed upon is we're going to share as much as we possibly can once we've got the patches solved, once all of the major stakeholders are aware, once the code has been written to solve the problem, we're going to talk about it. The reason we're going to talk about it is because we need this crap to stop happening. And the only way this crap is going to stop happening is if everybody's aware of the different challenges we're facing and how we've addressed them and what we're doing to fix them.
Good point.
Right. And when you stop disclosing that information, I can't, A, trust you as a vendor, and B, you are damaging the information that the rest of that community is reliant upon, even though Oracle and VirtualBox are depending on very said community to find flaws in all of the products that they make all of their billions of dollars off and the ones they give away for free. They're absolutely dependent on that security community, and they absolutely constantly trash and abuse that security community. For those of you who don't listen to Tech Talk Today, there was a story recently about Oracle's CTO who just came out like a total asshat and slammed the security community and basically said that if you find vulnerabilities in their products, they're going to go after you with a lawsuit. The problem with Oracle is they are sitting in a very important position technology-wise and installation base-wise, but they are not living up to their responsibility as a platform vendor at that scale. They're not living up to that responsibility in the security department. And this VirtualBox thing, I mean, for me, this is it. I'm done. I'm going KVM. I'm using boxes. Screw VirtualBox. It's never been good enough. It's always been the one I've used instead of VMware Workstation because it's a little bit easier under Linux and I didn't have to steal it or buy it. So you know what? I'm done with it now. KVM's way better. Boxes is way better. Screw Oracle. I just can't wait to get the last piece of Oracle code off my machine. They mess everything up.
KVM, I agree with you, is better if I'm doing server type stuff, but I've always found it to be lacking when I want to emulate a desktop.
I agree.
That's where it's really bit me. I can't do like full screen, full seamless integration, that kind of thing. And I haven't found another piece of software. And granted, I haven't tried VMware like you have. So maybe I should look in more seriously to that. I played with boxes for a little bit. I wasn't blown away, I guess. It's nice that it came installed by default in Fedora.
It's getting better and better with like every GNOME release. So it's sort of tied with the GNOME releases. And each time there's usually something in there that I like a little bit more. I know, it's not great. It's very frustrating for me. Hey, so let's talk about something that maybe is a positive story. You caught this news story over at OMG Ubuntu about an Ubuntu hardware store. Noah, what's this about?
Yes. So basically, you can now buy laptops and phones from an Ubuntu store with, obviously, no surprise, Ubuntu pre-installed on them. And I think that's a really good resource. I think that if you want to go buy a laptop right now, and let's just say, for example, you wanted to buy from a mainstream vendor, for some silly reason you didn't want to buy from a place like System 76, it's a real pain if you go to HP's website or Dell's website to find a computer pre-installed with Ubuntu.
Oh, for average people and stuff, or really,
right?
It's nearly impossible.
Yeah, and so like I was thinking, my mother, for example, she has become. You find those people that say, "Oh, I don't want to change because I'm so used to XP, or I'm so used to 7, or I'm so used to Windows in general." That my mother is exactly the opposite. I could never put her on Windows or Mac OS because from 10.04 on, or maybe even earlier than that, 8.04 on, she's been using Ubuntu. And so as the quirks that occur in Ubuntu, those are things that she has just learned to live with, and she doesn't notice them. And the stuff that wouldn't work in Windows, or the UI changes of Windows, would just totally confuse her. But every time she wants a new computer, she comes to me and says, "Well, what can I get for a new computer?" And then we go, and it turns into like a 6-month process finding her one that we can install Ubuntu on. And this is a way that I could definitely see her, tell her, "Hey, just open up the Ubuntu store. Go over to the store and pick yourself out a new laptop." That's something that she could do. Of course, you could just go over to system76.com and you'd buy probably a better computer than you can get on the Ubuntu store for probably a better price with better support. But if you didn't want to do that, this would be a great option.
So I wonder if this will expand as they get more phones available and things like that. It'll be something to keep an eye on. So let's talk about the year of Linux desktop actually arriving. Like this joke that never dies. It's maybe not true in the West, but it seems to actually be true in China. This is PC World's article. They say it's the year of the Linux desktop for Dell in China. For years, the year of Linux desktop was right around the corner. Open source software would displace Windows and usher in glorious peaceful revolution. That says PC World here. But if Dell is to be believed, the revolution is happening now. Dell's head of China told the Wall Street Journal that Neokin, or Kylin, I'm not quite sure how you say it, Linux is shipped on 42% of PCs it sells into China, primarily for commercial and government PCs that Dell specializes in. Hewlett-Packard also ships Neo-Kylin equipped PCs to China, and they say, according to the paper, not quite sure how many HP ship that way, but they're offering the same thing. Now, at the same time, there is another article over at China Tech at the South China Marketing Post at smp.com saying that more than 40% of Dell PCs in China now running homegrown Windows alternative. A couple of different news outlets are reporting this. Dell says that Dell's also made a press release about this, trying to generate some maybe because Apple's also been trying to generate press around sales, but Dell's trying to generate some press. And last week, it was unveiled that up to $125 billion as part of a new in China for China strategy. Dell's also announcing partnerships with Chinese cloud companies and state-owned components makers for different electronic parts. So Dell's really going all in over here, and they're seeing a huge return on investment on this. 40% of PCs shipping running Linux in China. Make you want to go visit there? I mean, seriously, no. Does it ever make you kind of want to visit and just see if you can see it for yourself?
I have, yeah, definitely. I have said for a long time that there are no technical limitations of Linux. There are social limitations of Linux. And what I mean by that is there is nothing that stops Microsoft from writing Microsoft Office on Linux. There's nothing that's stopping Adobe from writing Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom for Linux. They are social limitations. We have decided that we are going to use Windows on our desktops. And so because of that, all of the software vendors make the tools available for the platforms they think they can make the most money off of. When you remove that social limitation, i.e. you go into a place like China where they say, we are just going to get work done, and what do we need to, what kind of tools can we use to get work done? Well, if we want to use an Office suite, we can use XYZ, and if we want to do a photo editing, we can use ABC. And when you start to switch out those tools and you remove that social limitation, you find that people would rather buy a computer that has literally, basically a lifetime of upgrades, because if it comes, you can put, I mean, it comes with their own special version of Linux, but you could just put regular Linux on there. You could put just Ubuntu on it, right? And so as you start to leverage those advantages and you start to get all those other software solutions in place, that becomes a really viable solution. And then you start to sell a lot of computers. And the thing is, as we continue to move towards a more web-centric, culture, and where all of our tools are becoming online, This just becomes the natural choice.
All right.
I think that's why Chromebooks have taken off as they have.
Can I take a little conspiracy bacon approach
Please.
for this though? Because I mean, everything you just said makes a lot of sense. But I got a little conspiracy bacon here that thinks that there has been a major accelerator to this adoption in China of Linux, deciding across the board, we're not going to go to Windows 8, we're not going to go to Windows 10, we're not going to replace these XP machines with Windows, we're going to replace them with Linux. I think that's essentially what's happening here. And I think the reason it's happening, and this is my conspiracy bacon, get ready for this one, I think it's because of Edward Snowden. I think that the revelations of how much Microsoft works with the United States government and how paranoid the United States government is about China has made China equally paranoid about trusting Western software, specifically Microsoft software.
Yeah, I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that numerous people around the world have articulated the fact that they are wary of working with United States companies. I think that's a very real concern. But I think that privacy is... I would file privacy under, very importantly, but under just one of the advantages of using a Linux-based operating system.
But you know what's fascinating to me, Noah, is we've been sitting here for years talking about the year of the Linux desktop, and we never once, with our very Western view, thought it would happen in China. We always thought it would be here.
Yeah.
But it makes so much sense. And in India, too. The other thing about these reports is they're not reporting the massive adoption we're seeing in India as well, which is also fascinating.
Do you think that and maybe this is a little egocentric of me as a United States citizen to say something like this, but don't you think that a large portion of the world's technological road is carved out in the U.S., that we kind of set a trend and the rest of the world tends to kind of follow us? Is that me being egocentric, or do you think there's some validity to that?
I don't know. You know, I don't know the answer fully. It seems like a lot of times we maybe implement, like I look at CDMA and GSM, right? And I see how cellular networks were developed and deployed here in the U.S. and then other countries kind of watched us do it. And then they decided to change things a little bit and had a better long-term implementation. So that does seem to happen with some technologies there. That's a good question. You know, I hope it's not actually the case, to be honest. I hope it's not. Because if it is, we're really screwed by this FCC ruling because it could affect a lot of other people. America's crackdown on the open source Wi-Fi router firmware, the truth, from the register, they're going in and looking at this. So let's take a look at this because this is something that I think is really going to affect those of us who like to install alternative firmwares. And this is, if the United States of America does set a technology precedent, this is going to be a bad one. So Analysis American Broadband Watchdog is suffering a backlash over plans to control software updates to Wi-Fi routers, smartphones, and even laptops that have Wi-Fi chips in them. We've talked about this, I think it was last week or the week before. In a proposed update to the regulator's rules over radio frequency equipment, the Federal Communications Commission would oblige manufacturers to specify which parties will be authorized to make changes. In addition, it proposes that modifications by third parties should not be permitted unless the third party, that's you, receives its own certification. And we were just talking about OpenWRT and what a cool software project it is, and something like this would ruin it. But something like this even has the overreaching potential to block your ability to change the operating system on a device that has a wireless radio in it. Am I overreacting, Noah, or does this seem devastating to you?
It is devastating. So there are a couple different ways to look at this. The first way is from the, I'll play devil's advocate for a second. Do we not need to be somewhat concerned of allowing people to have control over a radio, and in doing so, you have the ability to essentially interfere with everyone else's router, everyone else that operates on that frequency spectrum? If you give people the opportunity to put any kind of software they want on there and use the radio any which way they want, then you run the risk of interfering with the legitimate use of everyone else. That's
a big concern. That's legitimate. That's a legitimate issue.
So, okay, all right. So now, and this is what I really think. If that's the case, why has it not been a problem for the last 20 years? For the last 20 years, we have had 802.11b radios. We have had Wi-Fi devices. Heck, those, what is it? I think it's the, like 8 gigahertz or 10 gigahertz. Those, the ones that they use for the building to building communication. They don't even have regulations on those. The only regulation is that you can't have them within like a mile of an airport or something like that.
I thought the way it worked, see, this is what I brought up a couple weeks ago. My understanding was the way it worked is essentially the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz spectrum were like have at it, Haas, and then the FCC was going to manage all the other stuff.
Yeah, I think there are some requirements on 2.4 gigahertz, but I'd have to go look at a band plan to.
No,
yes,
you have to follow certain requirements. Absolutely.
Right, but there are some frequency spectrums, like I said, the building to building, they don't have any regulation really on it. And my question is, if it is going to be a problem, or if that is the concern, why has that never been an issue? It's not like we have invented some new frequency spectrum that we're now going to use. It's not like nothing has changed. We're in the same boat today as we were 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, people were playing with 802.11b radio, 2.4 gigahertz radios, 800 megahertz radios, and it's never really been a problem.
Well, let's zoom out for just a second, Noah, and let's say the policymakers, this sounds like a good idea. We don't want people modifying the wireless spectrum, blah, 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 and they pass this. How the hell do you actually enforce it?
Well, I mean,
do you do it with the DMCA? Do you do it with self-destructing EEPROMs? Do you do it with lockdown hardware?
How it would work would a neighbor would detect some interference, or they would suspect that something has been modified and is causing a problem, and then they would contact the FCC, file a complaint. The FCC would come out and do a field analysis and say this person has modified this illegally, and then they would cite you with a $10,000 fine. The chances of that happening, but it's the principle that I have a problem with. I mean, to some degree, what's to stop you from buying a 1,000 watt radio and putting an antenna on the top of your camper and transmitting back to JB1 to do your audio shows? I mean, I can get you the equipment to do it. You can do it. The chances of the FCC ever finding out about it are slim, but we haven't really talked about it. We haven't really discussed doing it because at the end of the day, it's illegal. And there's like a $10,000 fine if you get caught. And this follows the same line. Is that would you actually get caught doing any of this? Probably not. But do we now have a law that essentially outlaws open source? Yes.
Yeah, I just can't. It doesn't compute for me. It seems the ban doesn't justify what you get by making this new law, by making this restriction. What you get from it doesn't justify the means. Does that make sense? Like what you're doing doesn't justify the end result.
I ask the question: what problem are we solving here? What problem? When is the last time that you have said, my golly, I can't connect to the Starbucks Wi-Fi because the gentleman next to me has illegally modified his radio with open source software and is now preventing me from... That never happens. That never once happens. There are so many other problems in the wireless spectrum other than people flashing firmware onto their routers that this is not even a discussion worth having if I'm the FCC.
Yeah.
All this is businesses using the federal government to ensure that we have to buy their products and use their products and their services the way that they want you to.
So if this is something that interests you in the audience and you want to know more about this, we've talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and we also have another link in the show notes to a wiki page that you can follow up, and you can go see how you can file a comment with the FCC and all of that. Although I think the comment period might be closed. But Libre Planet has the Save Wi-Fi campaign information, and we have it linked in the show notes. We've talked about it now a couple of weeks because we think it's pretty important. And like Noah was saying, sometimes we set a standard, and then other people make the same mistakes we did. So, man. All right. So one of the things we often do is the last news segment, or the last story in the news segment, is often sort of a looking forward news item. And something to just kind of tell you, this is something down the road you could maybe keep your eyes out for. AMD has confirmed it's going to write a Vulkan driver for Linux. That's great, because Vulkan's, I think, going to be a huge, huge opportunity for Linux desktop and for Android. However, I don't know why I have that picture up. However, it's going to start as closed source. So AMD has officially revealed some basic details concerning the support of Vulkan on Linux. And AMD has a Vulkan driver. It's going to begin, though, as a closed source blob. In the meantime, AMD Vulkan driver will transition to being open source, they say. This Vulkan driver is built to interface with their new AMD GPU kernel DRM driver that's part of their long talked about AMD open source strategy for Linux. This closed, then open Vulkan driver will be competing with Valve's Intel Vulkan driver that will be open from day one.
So if we look at the benefits of open source, it's like an inverse curve. We start where it's extremely beneficial to the designer, the developers, and the company that essentially wants the product, and over time becomes more beneficial to the end user. So for example, if I want to create an open source widget, I say I have an idea for an open source widget and I would like everyone to contribute their time. In that case, the community is losing, but I'm gaining ground because Now they're contributing their time and efforts and talents, and I'm reaping the benefits because I have the product. And then as that product gets completed, now that curve switches directions because now I'm sitting on a product, but everyone else is using it for free. It seems like AMD is, for whatever reason, stabbing themselves in the back because they're going to give up all of that community contribution and development, and then they're going to transition into open source?
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Makes no sense.
Let's see how long it takes. So today is Friday, September 18th, 2015. Let's see when we get that open source code.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we're on the same page on that one.
I don't think it's going to happen too soon. All right, Noah. That's all the news for this week. Spending some time in the rover, living offline has become a huge component of my technology solutions, and looking for an open source solution to Plex that matches that requirement and need has been my number one mission before I hit the road. I don't want to go crazy. I got to have my downtime. I got to have my media. I know a lot of you out there have been avoiding Plex because it's closed source and really kind of requires a third-party service to be feature complete. So I'm going to tell you about Emby. But before we get into that, let's talk about our segment sponsor. That's System76. Head over to system76.com and get yourself a machine designed, created, born to run Ubuntu. That means it's going to run perfectly out of the box. You're not going to fight with the Wi-Fi. You're not going to fight with the webcam or the Bluetooth or whatever. It's not going to be like that. And when you have to nuke and repave, you're not going to spend hours getting things set up. They got desktops and laptops. I want you to check out those desktops built right here in the US of A. The Meerkat is slick. The Ratel performance is awesome. And the Leopard Extreme and Silverbacks are monsters, and we have a Wild Dog performance in studio. Check it out over at system76.com and tell them the Linux Action Show sent you. Go get a machine that's meant to run Linux and stop biting with your hardware. And that way, you get to play with your Linux. System76.com. Okay, so let's talk about Emby. Emby is an open source media solution. Your media on any device. You can bring all of your media together in one place, and it's never been easier. The Emby server automatically converts and streams your different media on the fly to play on any device you're watching on. So if you're on a device that doesn't support MKV files, it doesn't matter. Or AVI files, it doesn't matter. But if your device has native support, then Emby will stream it natively to that device. This is a slick system. It's going to completely organize your media, your movies, your television, your photos, your music, and it's going to make it look really nice up on a Roku device or on your web or on an Android device. There's a whole range we're going to get into, and I'm going to tell you all about the different things it supports. But you do have to know there is a little prep work before you jump into something like this. Emby identifies all of your media according to a folder structure system, file names, and the type of library at which you said this media is going to be assigned to. So like when you set up Emby, you say this is a TV show or this is a movie. Once it's identified, Emby downloads information like posters, descriptions, and ratings that make media selection a rich experience. You know, that way you get the poster artwork and things like that. The requirements for organizing and naming the files are fairly flexible, but they do require a basic structure. Separate your media into appropriate folders. So movies into a movies folder, TV shows into a TV show folder, and music into a music folder, and photos into a folder. You guys are getting this. It's pretty obvious, but in order for Emby to be able to do its identification, you're going to have to do this part first. This is the prereqs before you get in to enjoy all this. Movies should be named like as much as possible, name, year, like Braveheart 2012 or whatever, or Brave 2012. TV shows should include season and episode number when possible, and be stored in separate folders per show. So, you know, Star Trek The Next Generation's in one folder, Star Trek Voyager's in a separate folder. Music should be stored within the artist and album folders, such as music, artist, albums, then tracks. Now, I have all of this outlined in the show notes, so it's actually not that difficult to set up. And by the end of this segment, we're going to tell you about an open source tool that automates the renaming of a lot of this stuff to include this information, to rename and organize all of like your TV shows and movies to one like common naming structure. We're going to tell you about an open source tool. And before you go any further, you are going to also need to install the Emby server. Once your media is all set up and organized, it's time to install the server. And the server is available for Windows, Linux, Mac, and FreeBSD, and also several NAS devices. If you're installing it from Arch, use the Git version. It's the only one that builds right now. And also, you're probably going to want to add some users because Emby has multi-user profile support. So you can invite friends, or you can have like a TV, you can have kids profile and like a parent's profile, which is how I have it set up. So that's Emby, sort of like the pre-work. Now, if you're familiar with Plex, you know that it's a really nice on-demand way to stream your media. And I was turned on to Emby by Wes from Linux Unplugged. And so I invited him on to the show to tell us how he uses it. And then Noah and I are going to tell you how we've been using Emby. I enticed Wes after Linux Unplugged to stay around and talk to me about his experiences with Emby because it was actually Wes who turned me on to it. And so I've been using it for a few weeks. Wes has been using it for a few weeks. And you've thrown some media in there, Wes. Like, how much do you got in there?
It's building every day. I'm working on some back-end infrastructure using a program called FileBot, if anyone's familiar. That'll automatically use like the movie and the TV database, and then sort it into your own.
Yeah, it does automatic renaming that matches like the metadata it found, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
so I'm working on importing some of my less than organized collection and into a beautiful organized Emby system.
And then once you have it all arranged, Emby takes a look at it. Emby
just picks it right up and streams it to any device I'd like.
So why did you use Emby over, like, obviously Plex or, say, Kodi?
I know a lot of coworkers, friends who use Plex. I've used Kodi in the past and really enjoyed it. Right now, I don't have a dedicated media PC. In my previous home, I used a lot of DLNA. I had a couple of smart TVs that they would thankfully play whatever file format I threw at them. In my current residence, we have a lot of Chromecast, a lot of dumber devices that don't support so many codecs, and I was looking for something that was open source, good community involvement that I could, transcode freely. So, everyone loves Plex. Plex is great. I don't think, I would never discourage someone from using Plex, but I'm really happy to see an open source community supported alternative.
So you've been experiencing Emby a little bit differently than I have. So my setup with Emby has been like, how do I do it all offline? How do I do everything offline? But one thing they have a component of that I haven't played a lot with is there is sort of like a Plex Pass style online component. Can you break that down a little bit for what you know of it?
Yeah, they have a similar system where they will kind of present you with a unified interface. You can go to app.emby.media, I believe.
Yeah.
And then once you've linked different sources, so I think in theory you can add other users as well on other user servers.
And it sort of acts like a Plex Pass and does a proxying connection back to your...
Exactly. So you use the app that's hosted there.
Now, is that free?
Yes, it is free. You have the option to donate to support, and you get some additional features. I think that's where you get the syncing feature, maybe a few others. But some of the things that Plex requires the pass for, you get for free with Emby.
But you are experimenting with remote media streaming without having this Emby online component,
Yeah,
right?
I keep a DNS record pointed at my home IP address. Thankfully, it doesn't change too often. And I've been sharing it with some of my friends and my family just to let them experiment.
Yeah.
And you can see right here.
Are you able, so you'll stream it here in the studio from your house?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so he's got it pulled up here. Let's take a look. Oh, that's nice.
What makes a great sandwich?
Yeah, what does make a great sandwich?
And the bread?
Sandwich is a piece of bread with meat. Any kind of meat you would like on it.
And you're able to just stream that sandwich special right from your house.
Yeah, no problem. And I've tried it on a lot of devices. One great thing is, the Chromecasts have kind of limited support for containers. A lot of my media is in MKV, but Chromecast won't play it.
Right, this does the transcoding for you.
And this will just transcode it, no problem.
And supports Chromecast.
Supports Chromecast, supports HTML5. Their player is HTML5, works very well.
Yeah.
I've tested it. They have an iOS app in development.
Yeah.
But I've tested it at least on a few iOS devices just using their web client, and that works pretty well.
Yeah, nice.
I've even done it on LTE on my way to work on my phone, and I was able to watch a whole TV episode streamed right to my phone.
He wasn't driving, though. Totally wasn't driving.
It was on the bus.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was great.
Good save. Very good. Well, that's fascinating. So you could stick with it? Are you happy with it?
Yeah, I don't think it's maybe not to the point where I would say that it's better than Plex, or that if you have a Plex setup that you're happy with, that you should move. But, like me, if you aren't already invested, it's definitely worth a shot to see if it'll meet your needs.
Is there anything missing for you?
Not yet. I've had a couple instances of, and maybe the personal error with, some permissions and metadata.
Yes.
But a lot of those seem to be nailed out. I'm working on a good solution with their scheduled tasks. I know Plex has a real easy way for you to trigger a library sync. They have an API. I haven't quite fleshed that out. If I do, I will make sure to post it in the subreddit.
Cool.
So there's maybe a few little weak holes, but open source, so we can make it better here, guys.
Yeah, and it seems like it's got a lot of momentum behind it. So.
They send you a little in your inbox, and they send you updates when they update stuff. And I think I've had 21 updates since I started using it on new Android client, new web client.
What are you running it on?
I am running it on a Archbox.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm running on, too. It's for the servers in Archbox. And so far, I think I'm running the Git version from the AUR.
Yes, I am as well. And that uses the new, that Git version, I think is based in part on the using the open build service.
Yes, exactly.
So
And
it's going to stay current.
that's the one you really do want. Some of the other ones won't even build right now.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay, Wes. Well, thanks for sharing your experiences with Emby.
My pleasure.
No, you're not a big Plex user, so I was curious what your take was on Emby as somebody who's not really used like a media orchestration server-side software thing.
Right. So I do have, I shouldn't say I do. I did have Plex for a little while. I was trying to convince myself that it was a worthwhile endeavor. And I'll tell you, the first thing I noticed about Emby over Plex that I really liked was Plex was way more painful to get set up. I did, obviously, as probably no surprise to you, is I did my server install on CentOS, and I downloaded the repo file that they had available there. I updated my repo and I installed it, and Emby server was there. And then all I had to do was start the Emby server with system control start. With Plex, there was all sorts of nightmarish things I had to do I had to emulate being on the local host because it was running from afar, but the way that it was set up, it won't let you connect in externally, and so I had to do this SSH port for it. It was a bloody nightmare, and I didn't find that with Emby. I like the fact that it's open source. I like the fact that that it's community sponsored and not a proprietary solution, but it still falls down on one fatal flaw, and that is I don't like remote media. To me, if I'm going to travel somewhere, and I think after this road trip, you might come over to my side of the boat, having it on a server somewhere else and streaming it to my device isn't cutting it for me.
Well, you can so the way I'm using it is I have it installed right now on my Dell XPS 13, and I'm watching it all locally. But the nice thing about it is all the other devices on that same LAN can also watch all the stuff on the XPS 13. So tablets, phones, and the other computers can watch it all right there. So I'm using it for local media and for streaming over the LAN, and I'm not using any online component at all.
Yeah. But I guess essentially, though, I guess what you're doing is you have moved your streaming infrastructure from your house over to your RV, no?
Essentially, it's setting up. It's the XPS 13 is the server for Emby. But that's perfect for me. I mean, that's so what I was looking for is something that gives me all the stuff Plex does, but also the capability to be completely offline, to be completely off the grid, which is exactly what Emby allows me to do with it. And in fact, Emby has some nice advanced features, like you can do certain like metadata fetching at scheduled times, which is nice.
Right. Yep.
So if I know I'm not going to have connectivity in the middle of the night, I can alter when it's going to go out and fetch that data. So Emby has certain power user features that Plex I don't think is ever going to introduce. Like when I go in here to the advanced section, like there's I can easily switch over to like beta releases right here in the drop down, which is really kind of just nice. I can set up hosting information right here, just like all this kind of, and like the plugin infrastructure, like there's already a Jupiter Broadcasting app that's been created. And what's super nice about that, Noah, is it ties right in with the content system. So like when I go to channels right here, it pulls in the latest Jupiter Broadcasting shows like it's just part of the media library. And so it does a really good job of working completely self-contained. But then if you add these different channels, it can pull on these online things that I would have streamed anyways. So for me, it's a little bit more the way I was using Plex is I would watch a lot of content at the studio from the house over Plex. And now this is allowing me to essentially have a recreated Plex setup at a smaller scale with just what I need for the road trip, all offline, all tracking what I've watched, where I'm at, my position in the playback, regardless of what device I'm on. And then if the trailer goes somewhere where I have public Wi-Fi, then I can get access to the stuff anywhere. The other thing that's kind of neat about it is the trailer, the Rover, has a built-in antenna, and something that Emby has support for that is kind of exciting is live TV. And it's not just like half-assed live TV support either. Like they've actually built in live TV support into the Emby server itself, and they support not just a live TV, but they also support like external services like the HD Home Run and things like that make bringing in live TV to all of not just the Emby server, but anything that can connect to your Emby server could also get live TV. It's like a really, really big deal. And I linked in the show notes the HD Home Run. It's a network tuner. that you plug your cable into wherever you're at, your over-the-air antenna, and then you give it a Wi-Fi or an Ethernet connection, and your Emby server connects to it over IP and can stream live television to all of the Emby clients.
What would the process look like if you were to run a local Plex server on your laptop? Do you think that you could solve the same problems?
Oh, yeah, for the most part, for sure, yeah. The thing is to make Plex, like to have all of the features of Plex, you do kind of need a Plex pass. Emby does have a donation structure that we're going to get into, but you can get a lot of Emby. You can get the core Emby functionality that you really need without a Plex pass. And the thing that is the big difference for me between Emby and Plex is that Emby is completely open source, and they've already included advanced power user features that Plex doesn't have.
Right. And so and Wes touched on it, so I didn't bother repeating it, but that is a big deal to me, is the fact that, like he said, a lot of the features that you get for free with Emby are things that you'd be paying for with Plex. And so I like, do you want to talk about the donation structure a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an important aspect of it, because some of the things you might want, you don't get without donating unless you roll them yourselves. I guess it's also worth mentioning before we say that there is, like, you don't have to have an app. You could do all of this through the web. So if nothing else, like if you don't want to have remote, like client streaming to your Android device or your iPhone or whatever, you could just use the web app. But if you want to donate, they have a donate system. And when you donate, you get extra features that are honestly fairly nice to have. And donation prices vary. I think you can get a lifetime for $80, or you can do like a monthly for a lower amount. But when you become an Emby supporter, you get the big thing for me is cloud and mobile sync. So you can sync offline. You can sync to your devices. So like if you had an Android phone or a tablet that you're going to want to watch a few movies on, Emby will sync to those devices automatically and keep them offline, so you don't have to have any connection at all on those devices, which is a really nice feature. But also by donating, you are also supporting the development. But did anything else jump out at you about it?
I think you actually said it. I think you just kind of brushed over it. You can get those other features. You just have to roll them yourself. So, and that, to me, that's a big deal, because if I'm the kind of person, I think you're the kind of person, I'll throw a couple dollars towards the development of a project if they provide me with the convenience because my time is valuable to me. Yeah. But on the other hand, I love the fact that the people that maybe aren't in a financial position to do that aren't excluded from using those features. It just requires a little extra
Wes,
work.
He's sharing his library with friends and family, and he hasn't gotten their subscription service at all. So that's pretty nice. Although
that is really neat.
I think I would, if I'm going to stick with it, I probably eventually would, once I can afford to donate. I probably would actually just kick in. I think that's kind of a nice thing to do. Now, you know what I think by this point in the segment we should probably mention, because people are probably just like double face palming at this point, is Kodi, right? That's the elephant in the room. What about Kodi? Kodi's an open source media center solution. What about, hey, Noah and Chris, don't you know about Kodi? Hey guys, don't you know about Kodi? Yes, we know about Kodi, but the thing is so does Emby. In fact, there is an Emby plugin for Kodi.
Which was how I used the client, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I did. I have a Kodi box that I'm testing, and so I was like, well, what better way to do it? And so I actually tried their app, and it was great.
Yeah, so it basically what? It brings your Emby database over to Kodi, right?
Maybe. I guess to me it seemed, maybe I'm missing what it was doing in the back end, but for me it seemed like what it was doing was connecting into my Emby server.
That's what I mean. Essentially, right? Yeah. And you get like the watch state and all of the library information from your Emby server is essentially like a Kodi app.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not bad. Did you like the experience?
I did. The thing that I'm having, and this is not Kodi's fault, and this is not Emby's fault, but the box I'm currently trying it on is one of these pre-built Kodi boxes, and I was having some issues with that. It has nothing to do with Kodi and nothing to do with Emby, but it made for a less than pleasurable experience. But as far actually downloading the repository and then adding the add-on manually, that was cake. I just follow like the 4 steps they have on the Emby site, and it's a done deal.
So now, before we get into we're going to talk about actually using Emby here in a moment. But the last couple of quick technical details: you can get Emby apps for Android and also Android TV. The Amazon Fire TV, of course, they have an HTML5 app. I guess they have an iPad and iPhone app in development. Kodi, like we mentioned, Media Portal, Roku, Windows Desktop, and Windows Phone apps are all available. Minimum requirements to run this is an Intel Core 2 Duo. But if you want to do like good transcoding of HD content, you're probably going to want a 2.4 gigahertz or better Core 2 Duo processor and at least 2 gigabytes of RAM. So, Noah, what did you actually think about the actual experience of using Emby to go through your media and stuff like that versus like, a file structure or like something else? What were your impressions?
I think the UI is beautiful. I think the folder thing was such a pain that I actually didn't. I just gave it some test media to do because I wasn't going to restructure all of my actual media. And actually, frankly, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't like the fact that I'm forced to use folder structures because that has other implications. It's not just Emby that looks at those media files, and so the workflows that I have set up on other devices and on other things. I'd have to
basically be making a switch.
Yeah, I would. And so I just gave it some test media to play with, for that purpose. But the responsiveness in the UI, and granted, I understand that has more to do with the hardware I'm running Kodi on and Kodi itself than Emby, but I thought it was a really well-designed UI. You had asked me, I had purchased earlier in the week, I had purchased what I thought was a new version of the Western Digital TV Live. I thought that because it said Western Digital Cinema and they had it sitting next to all of the other streaming devices. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, when I brought it home, it's a hard drive. They have just rebranded it. And I pull it out of the box. Well, because I'm telegramming you live as I'm doing this, and I'm like, man, this thing is really small compared to my old one. And I set it up, and I'm like, well, there's no connectors on the back. That's a little strange. I guess there's probably some cables to do that. And then I find out all they're doing is reselling a different hard drive. And as soon as I posted the picture on Twitter, of course, a bunch of people tweeted back at me, and they're like, you realize that's just a hard drive, right? Nope, didn't realize that until I got it home. And it promptly went back to Best Buy. Yeah, no, well, it is what it is. But the thing is, if somebody had taken a picture and said, what do you think of this? And I would have looked and saw the Chromecast sitting next to it and whatever Netgear streaming device is next to that, and the Roku sitting there, and then what was previously a Western Digital TV Live, which was a streaming device, and now they have something called a Western Digital Cinema. Yeah, I would have also assumed that was a streaming device. Unless you take a look at it, apparently, or, maybe read the box. Who does that? But I was comparing my Western Digital to the interface of Emby, and the thing is, Emby is way more inclusive. All I get is the list of I get the file name on my Western Digital. This, I get all and yes, I know Plex does the same thing, but I got all of the album art, and I got all that stuff that I'm not used to getting. The little synopsis, of the
cast and crew pictures.
Right,
you also get one of the things it can do is frame by frame analysis. It's using FFmpeg on the back end, and so you can jump to specific chapters in a movie so it'll automatically identify in Emby the different chapters in a movie, and you can jump straight to it. I mean, that's really slick. And then it'll also give you like the trailers, and then if you become a paying member, you get the full cinema experience where I guess you can even have there you go. So I was able to click, and it just jumped to a specific moment in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which if you haven't seen the director's cut, look how awesome that Vulcan shot looks. You never got to see that in the original version. Yeah, so anyways, Emby supports that. That's kind of a nice feature to have in there. And then you can just jump out and see here. So here's the different chapters, and I can of course go to all the different DVD. Just like you remember when you watched on a DVD, you could jump right to the chapter. Same exact thing that Emby is doing right here. I don't think Plex actually does that. Something else that Plex doesn't do, and I really like as a geek, is at the bottom of the page, way down at the bottom where you'd never actually scroll down to unless you were really geeky, is it gives you all of the media information broken out about that clip. So I can see that Star Trek: The Motion Picture file that I was just showing is an H.264 file. It's encoded with the high profile, level 41. It's 1920 by 816 resolution. I can see that it has a 9,000 bit rate on average. It has an 8-bit color depth. This is all stuff that I love. The primary audio is AC3. The layout is a 5.1 with 6 channels, and the audio rate is 625 kilobits at 48 kilohertz. I love to know that. Plex is never going to show me that. Emby shows it to me by default. I love it. I want that.
And the thing is, if you're the kind of quality perfectionist that you are, that's really useful. Frankly, I think most people will probably
that's
never
why they
even look
stash
at
it at the bottom. They stash it way down at the very bottom.
Yeah, that's true. It's out of the way.
I got a couple
because I didn't even notice it until you pointed it out.
Yeah, I got a couple of review notes to mention about using Emby. So I've noticed that you're gonna love this one, Noah. So just enjoy it, please. Emby apparently works better under Firefox than it does under Chrome.
I'm sorry, the Skype cut out there for a second. What'd you say?
I said that Firefox seems to work better with Emby.
Firefox works better. Got it.
For playback and metadata management. And on 4K displays, Emby seems to have a hard time actually scaling up to that display. I've not really experienced that with Plex for some reason. I don't know why that is. I'm talking about in the HTML5 playback on a high DPI display, it seems to really have a hard time driving that. That's probably not a super common use case, but under Firefox, it's better. And also, on my XPS 13, which is a pretty nice machine. It's not the greatest, but it's better probably performance-wise, I would think, than a NUC. It seems to be having a bit of trouble decoding the files fast enough. Like it's struggling to decode some of my HD files that, for whatever reason, Plex didn't ever struggle to decode, even though they're both just using FFmpeg on the back end. I don't understand why. I don't know what was different there. But it happened a couple of times when I was watching the latest episode of Mr. Robot, and it paused on me a few times. Why my machine buffered? I don't really know what that's about. I haven't digged into it a lot, but that's just something that jumped out at me. Also, just to cover my specific use case with Emby is not exactly comparable to my Plex use case, and I just want to make that disclaimer for the review. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies in Plex. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of TV shows in Plex. I have 4 TV shows in Emby and like 5 or 6 movies in Emby because I'm specifically just trying to stock it with media that I'm going to use on the road trip. And so my whole intention here is to be able to go off the grid, be completely offline, but still kind of live like I'm online. And that's what Emby is going to offer me. And I want something that's disassociated with my Plex system, right? So that's a benefit for me for Emby. And also, just to underscore, it is licensed under the GPL3, the GPL2, which I like a lot better compared to Plex. So there you go. That's Emby. And are you going to stick with it, Noah? No. For you, the big problem is the file structure change, right?
No, well, no, I could get over that. The thing is that I know this. I know how antiquated this seems because I feel like my clients when they come to me and start talking about how they want to go back to pen and paper to checking people in because it was so relaxed. I know that's what I sound like, but I just really like the fact that I set up my file server, which I already have, and I click on the little button, and then I have a NAS share, and I go and plug my little Western Digital thing in, and all my media's there. That was it. I didn't configure anything. I didn't set anything up. I didn't do any web pages. I didn't set up any users. I just plugged the freaking
I used
box
to be there.
In.
That's where I used to be. And now I look at my system now and I go, I could never go back. I could never go back. You know what makes it a lot easier? Wes mentioned it earlier, FileBot, the ultimate TV renamer, subtitle downloader, and SFV validator. FileBot is a great tool, and it helps if you are looking at a directory structure that isn't very set up for this kind of thing. FileBot is a great tool to make that better, and you can find it at filebot.net, and we'll have a link in the show notes for that. So FileBot might help if you ever decide to make the switch, Noah.
I'll keep it in mind.
Keep it in mind. I, however, am sticking with Emby. It's going to be the media center that powers the rover. I don't feel like I'll ever need to install Plex at this point. It's not, I don't think, quite yet in parity with Plex in terms of overall polish and feature set. It's close enough for what I need, and I'm ready to get behind an open source Plex alternative, which Emby appears to be it. And so the rover from day one is going to have Emby, and I'll continue to use it there, and I'll report back on it. But that is the Linux Action Show's look at the open source alternative to Plex. You know it, Emby. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But before we get out of here, we got some feedback to get to and an announcement from our friends over at the BSD Now show. They are on the hunt for a new producer. I'll have a link in the show notes. BSD Now is the #1 BSD podcast. I'm super, super proud to be able to say that. I mean, these guys have been week after week producing an amazing show. If you didn't see their Ubuntu Kills Kittens episode, that's one to watch for the history books. And they are now on the search after many, many episodes for a new producer, just like we've done in the past. And I thought the Linux Action Show community, there might be somebody out there who's a closet BSD fan. And now they can go celebrate it. Noah, is that you? I don't think so. All right, so Johnny K writes in with our first email, Fastmail with YubiKey. I didn't hear you guys talk about Fastmail's YubiKey support, so check it out at fastmail.com/help/account/2fa.html. Anyways, I love the show, and I may be getting a new email address also. I too own a camper trailer. It's just a small pop-up, but it's a lot of fun. Well, thanks, Johnny K. And Noah, have you checked out their YubiKey support after last week's episode?
I didn't know they had YubiKey support.
Nice.
And now I do. And now I'm certainly going to be setting it up because that's amazingly cool. And here's the thing. And when I read this email, this is what came to my mind. I asked myself, I said, why don't you have any sort of two-factor authentication or some sort of additional security on my email? And then I immediately hit myself in the head. So this is all happening inside my head.
Naturally.
You can picture this, right?
Naturally.
Like blood was shed inside of my head. And the other side of my head said, well, because you moron, if you ever get locked out of any sort of authentication, the way they're going to reset that is with your email. So for example, should I have locked myself out of Gmail with LastPass and then for whatever reason left all of my LastPass stuff at a conference, I would not be able to get into any of the accounts that are secured with LastPass. Unless I try to reset my password, they will send that email to my email, which I am still locked out of because I don't have LastPass. That's why I didn't have it set up. But with the YubiKey, I'm less concerned because you can usually with those two-factor authentications, you can add more than one. And of course, as you're well aware, I carry one in my laptop and I wear one around my neck. Yes. And as long as I don't take the one off my neck because I'm wearing a t-shirt and put it in my computer bag and check them all at the hotel, I'll be set.
Now, the other thing that strikes me about that there, Noah, is it sounds like you're saying your email is so vital you don't dare set it up with something that would prevent access to it, but yet it's so vital you want to make sure it's secure. That's a real dichotomy you're stuck in.
Yes, it is yes, I couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, do you want to take our next email, sir?
I would love to take our next email. Our next email is from Jason B, and Jason B says, "Hi all. For those who are stuck in the Microsoft Exchange world and need connectivity to Exchange Calendar from your Linux desktop, check out the Thunderbird extension, and it requires Lightning." And then he gives a link to the Exchange Calendar extension.
Ooh.
I've had, exactly. That was my reaction. I've had poor luck with many similar plugins, but so far this one has been solid for me. Note the Exchange admin has been had to enable Exchange Web Services or EWS on the Exchange for this plugin to work. Now I have clients up to my eyeballs that have been asking for Exchange support in Thunderbird, and then I have a whole nother pool of people that would switch over to Thunderbird if I could find a way to tie it into their Exchange system. So this, to me, is life-changing. And so it made the show because we have to tell everyone else about it.
I mean, there was a time in my career where getting Outlook to run under Linux was a absolute game changer. It was the line between being able to run Linux and not being able to run Linux. And to this day, I still give shout-outs to Crossover Office. Because they made it possible at that time, and then later on Evolution built it in, but Evolution's support was kind of wonky over the years, and being able to run Outlook was huge. And I migrated over to Thunderbird and would use the Exchange Web Services for just like accepting calendar invites and things like that, and then use IMAP to actually download the email and respond to emails. But this would be so much better and feel, for an end user, much more integrated. All right. Yep. So Darren D writes in with an email about the mobile studio, aka the Rover. He says, if you guys are really going to take the mobile studio on the road, well, yeah, we really are. It's happening tomorrow. You should turn that content into content for your nerdy audience. Well, then I think you should go full A-team on this. You should modify your big rig into a Linux-powered beast. I personally think more Turtle Van and less Batmobile should work. Oh, I like the way he works. But either would be great. Here's some suggestions. Number 1. Single button transformation. Once your mobile studio is parked, much like the Terran tank on Staircraft, you need to press a button to make it lock itself into the ground and get all tornado-proof. Obviously, various dish eyes, antennae, and wind turbines should be swung into place. Some lightweight solar panels should open up into the substantial awning, and various drone bays should be primed. The drones are perhaps named after the Jehovian moons? Maybe a huge foam triangle could emerge from their hidden compression and dampen all ambient sound for a cleaner recording. And of course, number 2, the whole fruit bowl. You're running off battery and need to run a bunch of Linux stuff without much power. The Raspberry Pi, the Banana Pi, the Orange Pi are all go-to options when you want hardwired processing for just a few watts. They barely need anything, and you can run an LED marquee or something with minimal power. The guys over at Mycroft should be able to help you out and pimp out that Knight Rider with a voice to bring it all together. I don't know if you're automating, but since it's a house, a broadcast studio, a surveillance van, and, a Ting Hotspot showcase, and also a Starship all-in-one, a little Serenity needs some upgrades. It needs a very clever security system at least, since they'll obviously be picking up some expensive kit. And number 3, Minecraft in your pocket. You're going to need a keychain or an app for your phone to make it transform back into a mobile mode and to go to your next location. Is there an open source self-driving car out there? Could Minecraft drive? And number 4, you're going to need a paint job. No 18 montage is complete without a new paint job, but I recommend grafting crazy shit on there to make it look a bit more mech-like. Maybe do an image search for Jeepney just to get inspired. Oh, and number 5, I love burrowing, flying, and underwater navigation, but those would be pretty sweet features if you could add them. At least have a drone for that purpose when necessary. As for names, meaningless recursive acronyms are always best. Thanks, Darren. That's pretty good.
Darren has the vote now, my vote, as my most favorite piece of feedback I have ever read since being on the show.
I tried to give
That's
it some
it right
life.
there.
Tried to give it a performance.
No, it was good.
It was long.
Brought a
It was
tear to my
long,
eye.
though. It was a lot to get through.
It was so worth it. Everyone agrees.
So voting has occurred on this show and on the Linux Unplugged show for the last 2 weeks. 1 week before. Anyways, who cares? Anyways, so the official name of the mobile studio is the JB Rover. You can track it at jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover. The name of the specific road trip, let me double check, but I actually thought it was going to be the Last Cribs Roadshow because obviously, part of this is I'm driving to Noah's house to do a tour. I am on a mission to find out that Noah doesn't use Linux somewhere in his house. And because he has an automated home, I got to figure somewhere in there it doesn't run Linux. And I'm going to find it.
You keep digging. For like the 6th time, even on air, I keep saying I do have to use VirtualBox to do some of this stuff.
I'm sorry, what was that? I'm sorry.
I said I have to use VirtualBox to do some of this stuff. Some of the programming requires some other operating system that's less desirable, but I have never hidden from that. I do use VirtualBox from time to time.
Proprietary software is not ethical.
So
I understand that.
We asked the Linux Unplugged audience to name the Roadshow because the Linux Action Show audience named the Rover. And the Linux Unplugged audience has picked the Finding Linux Roadshow. And I kind of like that because one of my intentions everywhere I go, anywhere I see technology, I am bound and determined to figure out if they run Linux or not. So I am going to be constantly searching for Linux. So we are calling the Roadshow officially the Finding Linux Roadshow, which kicks off tomorrow, Saturday, on the trek to see Noah, the Finding Linux Roadshow. And you can track it at jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover. And the reason why I wanted to give it a name is because it's hopefully not going to be the only roadshow. So each roadshow will get its own name. And it'll always be in the JB Rover. So that should be cool. All right, Noah, do you want to point folks anywhere throughout the week to find more of your face or information about you or what the heck you do?
Yeah, we're working like crazy to expand a couple of things. And we just launched we have 3 hotels now that we're doing remotely. Where we're just shipping them equipment. The first 3, because they were close enough, we've actually gone out there and our team has spent many thousands of hours and thousands of dollars of my money putting together a solution that we can essentially support from afar. And hopefully that takes off a little bit because as I'm watching what is taking off in the hospitality world, it's people want reliable support, but they want it at a very low price point. And to do that, the only way to do that is to have, it's an economy of scale thing. If you can do a lot of hotels and have them centrally managed by just a couple of people, then that becomes a very cost-effective way to do it. So hopefully that's taking off, and I guess you'll get a first-hand look at some of that stuff.
Ooh, I can't wait, man. I can't wait. So follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/ChrisLIS. Follow the network, Jupiter Signal on Twitter, and also, just in case there's any kind of schedule changes because of connectivity problems or anything like that, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. We'll have hopefully as many updates as possible, and I'll try to tweet them and things like that. So hopefully you'll keep everybody in the loop, and if everything goes as scheduled, I'll be in Noah's neck of the woods right around this time next week. Oh, I guess last minute plug. It's probably too late for the Spokane meetup, but meetup.com/jupiterbroadcasting. We'll be setting up meetups there as we go along US 90, and Odyssey Western will be in there. And there's the forum in there. If you're somewhere along there and want to meet up, let us know. Meetup.com/jupiterbroadcasting. All right. That brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. See you right back here next week. So I got the box and I started opening it up. So it's pretty cool. The one thing that jumps out at me though is I got a lot of 9-volt batteries.
Yeah, you do.
But I don't see how what I'm not seeing is how I plug that inverter into DC power in the rig.
Yeah, so here's how that works.
Okay.
So things changed a little bit along the way because as it turns out I had like no time. I didn't actually even get all the parts until Wednesday, and so that kind of ruled out like second guessing myself for trying to go back and find a new solution. Well, come to turn out, the mixer came. The mixer came with the little transformer, but I didn't have the little connector to turn that into 12 volt. Oh, no problem. So I go over to the music shop and I'm like, I need a DC powered mixer. And the guy goes, the only DC powered mixer we have in stock is this one, and it runs off of 9 volt batteries. And I'm like, well, whatever, good enough. So the 9 volt batteries are actually for the mixer. So the mixer is self powered. Now the AC cord for the mixer is included. And it's on the right. All the power is on the right-hand side of that rack.
It looks like it looks like the mixer is going into the inverter.
It is.
Okay.
Here comes problem number 2. So the last part to arrive was the compressor gate, which is like, by the way, it sounds amazing. So the sound when you plug mics into it, I don't know if you've done that yet, but I think it sounds incredible. But the little compressor gate limiter thing, they send it to me, and I asked the guy like 15 times. I'm like, so this is 9 volts DC. Yup, 9 volts DC, 9 volts DC, no problem. So I order a step-down transformer to go from 12 volts DC to 9 volts DC, and guess what? Shows up, and it's 9 volt AC. So I didn't have the right electrical component to change that into 12 volts or to 9 volts DC. So I was like, well, I guess I have to put an inverter in now. So I mounted. So then I had to buy 5 different inverters because I had to find one that didn't have the fan that runs all the time.
Oh man!
So I just returned the other ones. But so I go to like Lowe's and Home Depot. I'm like all over the stores. I eventually find one in Fargo, which is about 70 miles away, and it's a 450 watt inverter, but it only kicks on the fan when you draw past a certain amount of watts or whatever. So I can run. So when you plug it in, like the fan will start up for like a second and a half, and then it shuts off. And then the fan stays off unless you draw. Like if you plug your laptop and a bunch of other stuff in, then it might kick up. I suppose I should have tried with both the mixer and the limiter plugged in at the same time. But it's okay because the mixer can power itself, and I bought you enough 9 volt batteries to last forever. Because the guy said that it runs forever on just a single installation. And
that's amazing.
There's a screwdriver to put the 9 volt batteries in underneath the lid.
That's
There's
incredible.
A little, like foam thing.
A 9 volt powered mixer. That's amazing. Okay, but so there is like a red and black power line coming out of the crate. What does that go to?
That goes to there's another wire in there, and it's another red and black wire, and that red and black wire plugs into the red and black wire that you found, and then the other end of that other red and black wire has a little cigarette lighter pluggy.
So I didn't see how those two ends connected.
You push them together.
They look like they're the same. They look like they're both female adapters.
They do, and that's what's great about it.
Okay.
They are genderless, Chris.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So here's what's great about that. Let's say you have a little 12 volt battery that you want to take with you so that you can go do like a field production somewhere, right? And you want to charge your 12 volt battery.
Sure.
You can just plug the cigarette lighter thing into the 12 volt battery, and now it's the charger. And wait, now you want to power the rig with the 12 volt battery. Well, with the same connector, you can now plug it into so you don't have to think about, well, this one has a female and that has a male.
Nice.
They're genderless, and they support up to 20 amps. So you can draw a ton of power off those little connectors and not have to worry about blowing fuses or burning them up or starting on fire.